the Senate hearing on birthright citizenship happened. And there was a lot of meat there that we want to talk about. And most important thing is, if you are in this situation, how do you plan for the next 5-10 years? Because I think that is going to be pretty important. And so this is Congress doing a fact-finding analysis and weighing the pros and cons and discussing it before the Supreme Court decision. And why is this important? Because whatever the Supreme Court decides, there is a high chance that they will just kick it back to Congress to make a formal ruling to change the Constitution, right? And change the interpretation of the Constitution. There's people who are extremely for it, and there's people who are against it, and everybody is discussing the impacts of it, right? Very similar to what you will see at the Supreme Court trial. But I want to share my take on it. You know, I'm a certified immigration specialist. I know this area extremely well, and there's a lot of things I feel like they missed. And it's convoluted, so I want to break it down in as simple terms as possible. The key issue here is the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is a U.S. citizen. The whole question, this entire debate, is what does subject to the jurisdiction mean? We're not debating whether or not you're born here, right? All persons born in the United States. Okay, there's no ambiguity there, but it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So one party is saying, well, if you are unlawful in the United States, or if you're a tourist in the United States, you're not really part of the U.S. fabric, so your children shouldn't be a U.S. citizen. You're not subject to the jurisdiction. And then there's a lot of debate regarding the ramifications of this. Well, how does the states know? How does a hospital know who here has visa status? Only USCIS has that information. Are you going to make that like open source? Everybody could check everybody's immigration status, right? Like, and what if one state doesn't do it and another state does it? And so one state they're a citizen and another state they're not? Like, how confusing and how disruptive would that be? So there's a lot of debate about the practicality of this birthright citizen issue. But it goes deeper in talking about what the motive is. Law is really just public policy. And what's public policy? What's good for the country? And what's good for the country? That's your opinion. What is good for the United States? What is a good public policy? Why should we have birthright citizenship in the first place? And then, once you figure out the public policy, then you come up with a law that codifies it. That is law. So now the Constitution has been set for a long time. People born here are citizens. It made sense, it made good sense because the United States wants to expand their population size, right? We want more people to be citizens, to till the land, to expand the western frontier, manifest destiny. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of buildings to make, a lot of wars to fight. Have we gotten to a point in the United States where we don't want people? So that's a big discussion. Now, really it boils down to two camps of people, right? One camp are the undocumented people that have crossed the border over the past few decades, and there are millions of them that have had children, and now the children are U.S. citizens. Should that be stopped? The other camp is birth tourism. People from overseas flying in as a tourist, give birth, and go back home. And now their children raised, grown, read, bred, taught, educated, quote unquote, brainwashed, come back to the U.S. when they're 18, 20, 21, and they are U.S. citizens and have every right and privilege of a U.S. citizen. What does that, should that be? Is that a concern? This situation, both camps, definitely didn't happen when the founders codified it in the Constitution. So what is the concern? What is the threat? And you can think about this in a lot of ways, right? Is it a good thing for the United States to have U.S. citizens grow up in a different country? It didn't use any taxpayer dollar to educate them, to raise them. And if they passed away overseas, they didn't use hospital bills in the U.S. or a cemetery in the U.S., right? And they grow up to be a highly educated individual. If they want to come back to the U.S. and they contribute to the economy immediately, that should be a good idea. Now they're productive members and they immediately start working and paying income tax. Should that be a good thing? Should not be a good thing? Obviously, national security is thinking of, what if they are now brainwashed and they come in as a spy? Maybe that is a concern. Or maybe it's a concern like, well, now they get the citizenship and then undocumented individuals get their citizenship and they are still starting to apply benefits for other people. Well, that is a concern, and the United States doesn't want chain migration, and so they stopped that. That's where I come with my prediction. And I'm not just predicting things out of thin air, right? The existing immigration law, as it is right now, there are lots of restrictions on US citizens' privileges. I mean, most people know if you're a US citizen, you can vote, right? You could go serve on the jury duty. I don't think that is the biggest concern, but in immigration terms, if you are a citizen and you want to pass on your citizenship to somebody else, your children who's born abroad, or you want to petition somebody, the consulate, as well as USCIS, as well as Department of Homeland Security, they have a lot of regulations and rules, right? And you have to have physically been present in the US after the age of 14. There's a lot of rules that they place on you before you can extend your ability as a US citizen to grant rights for anybody else. So one thing that I predict will happen in this big grand debate in the next 4, 5, 6 years over the birthright citizenship is that it might not go completely extreme, where it's like if you are a tourist or if you're undocumented and you come in and you give birth, absolutely no citizenship. I mean, that's one end that's very, very extreme. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle where the people who are born, and if you are born from an undocumented family, maybe your ability to petition people is going to be more difficult. You're going to have more requirements. Maybe instead of 21, you might have to be 26. You might have additional requirements to prove you are financially able to support the family, not just your age, right? Or maybe you have to have resided in the U.S. for about 10 years as a U.S. citizen in order to have any of these right privileges, right? Or if you're born here but left the U.S. and you want to petition somebody else, maybe you have to have an interview and you have to pass all these other citizenship requirements as well. So there's all these other requirements I think it's going to be added that prevents the big concern, whatever it is of why it's bad to have birthright citizenship. I think they're going to, USCIS and the federal government will come up with things that prevent that. I just don't think it's good public policy for the United States to change the Constitution when what they are concerned about is so narrow, right? The undocumented birthright citizen, people who are born here, they grow up here, they're just like the other children. And are you going to disqualify all of them? The people who are born abroad, birthright tourism, is that a bad thing? There are good public policy arguments why that is actually a good thing for the United States, just like why it's a good thing for green card holders and U.S. citizens to leave the United States and live abroad because you're not sucking out the U.S. insurance system and you live abroad, right? People come to the United States, work hard, achieve your American dream, and then in your retirement years, get out of here. That's like part of the formula. And so directly canceling constitutional, changing the amendment, and I just don't foresee that happening. Whereas just changing your USCIS policy, that is, I think, much more of an appetite for most Americans and still advancing the public interest and the public policy of the United States. But I guess for the people who do have U.S. citizen children abroad, and if you are banking on U.S. citizen children petitioning you, prepare for this. Because if your kid is in junior high, in high school, your original timeline of them petitioning you in 21, that might be pushed back. There might be other requirements. You might want to come up with a plan B. Maybe you want to come into the U.S. right now with a L1 visa, with an H1 visa that allows for immigrant intent, and then do adjustment status here. Because if you are abroad and the consulate will deny you, potentially just like the 7-5 country ban, right? The consulates have a lot of authority. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's just so interesting how we now are talking about people that are coming in whichever way, like tourist visas, undocumented, that just came to have children here. But how the government now looks at it as a threat, like it's no longer, it's just a child being born and it's not just a human life. I think that's kind of like what impacts me the most. I think it's a lot deeper than just an immigration process that just, like a legal matter is much more like, what the U.S. is portraying to the world. Like this, American dream is it really now the American dream?
Yeah.
Right? Is it really worth all the sacrifices that people make? How is this going to impact the whole world? I think it's just interesting to see what this is going to end up at. I remembered back in 2005 or 2007, they already talked about birthright citizenship. So this has been an ongoing topic for probably the last 20 years, where, people get nervous and then it doesn't go anywhere, and then other people are like, oh, it's not even worth like making the sacrifice. So it'll be really interesting on how it develops, but again, it's just not a legal matter. These are lives of human beings that are trying to just get through life.